They mocked the quiet African nanny like she was invisible, humiliated her, blamed her, and treated her like she didn't belong. But what they didn't know was that her silence was hiding a truth so powerful it would bring their entire empire to its knees the moment her billionaire mother walked through the door. The Mensah estate stood on the hill like it had something to prove. Its walls were white, its gates were taller than most people's dreams, and every visitor who walked into that compound lowered their voice without knowing why. Power lived there. Old money lived there. Pride lived there. And in houses where pride lived too long, kindness usually died first. Every morning before sunrise, while the city was still rubbing sleep from its eyes, a young woman named Zola crossed the inner courtyard with a tray in her hands and silence in her chest. She was the nanny for little Ethan Mensah, the youngest grandson of the family. To the outside world, that title sounded respectable enough. But inside the mansion, Zola was not treated like a caregiver. She was treated like furniture that happened to breathe. Madame Beatrice Mensah, the matriarch of the house, believed service workers should never look too comfortable. If they are too comfortable, she liked to say, they forget their place. So Zola learned early that in that house, even doing your work perfectly could still become an offense. If Ethan laughed too loudly, they said she was spoiling him. If he cried, they said she was careless. If guests praised how calm and well-mannered the child was, Madame Beatrice would smile and take the credit like Zola did not exist. Still, Zola never argued. She moved through those halls with a calm that confused cruel people. Her dresses were plain. Her hair was always tied neatly behind her head. Her voice was soft. Her answers were short. She did not gossip with the cooks. She did not complain to the guards. She did not ask for pity. And because she did not beg to be noticed, the family convinced themselves she was small. But Zola was not small. She was observant. She noticed how Mr. Richard Mensah, the eldest son, smiled in public and shouted in private. She noticed how his wife, Lydia, corrected staff members louder when guests were near. She noticed how the family talked about morality at church and talked about poor people like dirt at dinner. She noticed who stole from petty cash, who lied about overtime, who signed forms without reading them, and who thought no servant was educated enough to understand the papers left on the study table. Zola saw everything, and she remembered everything. The only person in that mansion who treated her like a human being was Kwame Mensah, the second son of the family and Ethan's uncle. Kwame had just returned from Rwanda after helping expand the family's transport business across East Africa. Tall, composed, and always carrying the tired eyes of a man born into money but not peace. Kwame was the kind of man whose silence meant he was thinking, not obeying. He first truly noticed Zola on a Thursday afternoon. The family was hosting a business luncheon. Politicians, investors, and one famous television host were seated under a crystal chandelier while waiters moved like shadows around them. Ethan had been restless all morning, and Zola had finally gotten him to sleep in the nursery upstairs. Just as she stepped back into the corridor, Lydia came out of the dining room in heels sharp enough to stab the floor. "Where have you been?" Lydia snapped. "With Ethan, madam. He was finally able to sleep." Lydia's mouth tightened. "And who gave you permission to disappear while guests are here?" Before Zola could answer, one of the kitchen staff accidentally bumped a cart. A jug of fresh juice spilled across the marble floor, running fast toward the entrance of the dining hall. Every head turned, And without missing a breath, Lydia pointed at Zola. "This is exactly what happens when you fill a house with village carelessness." Zola stared at her. She had not touched the cart, but the house had already chosen its truth. She bent to clean the mess. Then a chair scraped loudly behind them. Wami stood. "She didn't do that," he said. The room froze. It was not just what he said, it was where he said it. In front of investors, in front of family friends, in front of the people whose opinions mattered most to the Mensahs. Lydia laughed softly, but there was poison in it. "Are you correcting me over a nanny?" Kwami's face did not change. "I'm correcting a lie." Nobody spoke after that. Zola cleaned the spill. The guests pretended to resume their conversations, but something had shifted. In a proud house, truth spoken out loud was more offensive than injustice. That evening, while the sun bled orange across the edge of the city, Wami found Zola in the back garden helping Ethan stack little wooden blocks on a bench. "You didn't defend yourself," he said quietly. Zola kept her eyes on the child. "Some people do not want truth. They want obedience." Wami studied her. "And you give it to them?" "No," she said. "I give them patience." It was such an unusual answer that he almost smiled. From that day, he began to notice the details other people ignored. He noticed that Ethan spoke better when Zola read to him. He noticed she arranged the nursery like someone trained in order and child development, not casual babysitting. He noticed that when the family generator failed during a storm, Zola calmly reset the panel before the electrician even arrived. He noticed that when Madame Beatrice misplaced a diamond brooch and accused 2 maids of theft, it was Zola who found it hidden inside the lining of an old handbag and quietly saved the women from being fired. He also noticed something stranger. Zola read financial newspapers. Not casually, not like someone sounding out difficult words. She read them with speed, focus, familiarity. One night, he saw her in the outer lounge after midnight, seated under a standing lamp with a business magazine open on her lap. "You follow corporate acquisitions?" he asked. She closed the magazine too quickly. "A little." Kwame leaned against the doorway. "That isn't a little. Most people don't read merger analysis for entertainment." This time she looked up, and for the first time he saw it clearly. Behind the soft voice and lowered eyes was not fear, but restraint. The kind of restraint powerful people learn because revealing too much too soon is dangerous. Before he could press further, a voice sliced through the room. Vanessa Agimong had arrived. Vanessa was the daughter of a mining magnate and the woman everyone expected Kwame to marry. Not because he loved her, not because she loved him, but because certain families believed marriage was just business wearing makeup. Vanessa entered the mansion as if the house had been waiting all day for her permission to breathe. She wore gold on her wrists and contempt on her face. She hugged Madame Beatrice, kissed Lydia in the air, and then stopped cold when she saw Zola standing with the magazine in her hand. "Oh," Vanessa said, amused. "The nanny can read." A few people laughed. Zola said nothing. Vanessa walked closer, lowering her voice just enough to make the insult feel intimate. "Be careful, darling. Books can confuse people who are not meant for certain rooms." Kwame's jaw tightened. "Enough." Vanessa turned to him with a smile too polished to be sincere. "What? I was joking." "No," he said. "You were performing." That should have been the end of it. But in houses full of ego, humiliation is never enough. Cruel people always come back for one more cut. A week later, the Mensah family hosted a charity gala inside the estate. Cameras flashed. Music floated from the terrace. Women in silk moved from table to table like expensive weather. The event was meant to celebrate the family foundation for community empowerment, a phrase that sounded beautiful until you saw how they treated the people serving the canapés. Zola spent the evening keeping Ethan calm in the upstairs wing, while the adults downstairs congratulated themselves for caring about the poor. Around 9:30, Ethan developed a sudden fever. His skin went hot. His breathing became uneven. Zola reacted immediately. She cooled him with cloths, checked his temperature twice, and rushed downstairs to inform the family that the child needed a doctor. But Madame Beatrice was in the middle of taking photographs with donors. "Not now," she hissed. "Madam, his fever is rising." Lydia frowned. "You probably overwrapped him. This is why training matters. He needs medical attention now." Richard looked annoyed more than concerned. "Stop creating drama in front of guests." Zola felt something inside her go hard. Without waiting for permission, she turned and carried Ethan straight past the ballroom, past the terrace, past the astonished eyes of guests and security men, and toward the front drive. Wami saw her from across the hall and followed. By the time they reached the car, Ethan was shivering. "Get in," Wami said. She hesitated. "If your family sees—" "I said get in." He drove like a man escaping something larger than traffic. At the hospital, Zola stayed beside Ethan through the tests, the fluids, the doctor's questions, and the long 2 hours before his fever finally began to fall. Kwame watched her the entire time. Watched the way she knew what medications Ethan was allergic to. Watched the way the child clung to her voice even in discomfort. Watched the way the pediatric consultant assumed she was the mother because of how naturally she carried responsibility. When they returned just after midnight, the mansion was waiting. Madame Beatrice stood in the grand foyer in a silver gown that made her look regal from a distance and merciless up close. "You took my grandson out of this house without permission," she said. Zola did not lower her eyes. "He needed urgent care. You embarrassed this family." "No," Zola said quietly. "Illness embarrassed your priorities." The slap came fast. Nobody expected it. Not Kwame, not Richard, not even the guards at the entrance. Madame Beatrice had struck Zola across the face so hard that the sound echoed against the marble. Little Ethan, half asleep in Kwame's arms, began to cry. And in that terrible silence, something irreversible happened. Kwame stepped between them. "If anyone ever touches her again," he said, voice low with controlled fury, "I will make sure this house never knows peace." Madame Beatrice stared at her son as though he had betrayed blood itself. Then she spoke the sentence that should have ended everything. "By morning," she said, "that girl is gone." Zola packed before sunrise. She folded her dresses. She placed Ethan's favorite storybook on the shelf near his bed. She wrote a short note for the child because she knew he would ask for her. And when she reached the bottom of the servants' staircase with one small bag in her hand, she found Kwame waiting there. "You're leaving just like that?" She gave him a tired look. "This house has made its decision." "Then let me help you." "Why?" He held her gaze. "Because everyone here sees what they can use. I want to know who you are." For the first time, Zola looked almost sad. "That is exactly why I cannot let you follow me." Then she walked through the side gate and disappeared into the waking city. Kwame lasted less than 6 hours before he went looking for her. The address he found in Ethan's school emergency file led him far from the polished districts into an older neighborhood where the roads were narrow and the walls held the history of rain. He stopped outside a modest compound with a blue gate. Children were playing nearby. A woman was washing vegetables in a basin by the door. Zola was inside, speaking gently to an elderly man whose medication bottles were arranged with military precision on a shelf. The house was small, but it was dignified. Every file in the sitting room was labeled. Every bill was clipped and sorted. There were books everywhere: economics, policy, child psychology, labor law, non-profit governance. Not the books of a village nanny trying to survive. The books of a strategist building something. Kwame's eyes landed on a framed photograph near the window. In it, a younger Zola stood beside a striking woman in a navy suit at what looked like an international summit in Addis Ababa. Cameras flashed behind them. Diplomats surrounded them. The woman's face was familiar. Too familiar. Kwame picked up the frame slowly. "Zola," he said, voice unsteady. "Why are you standing next to Dr. Helena Dlamini?" Zola's face changed. Not with shame, with inevitability. Before she could answer, tires rolled to a stop outside the gate. Then another vehicle. Then another. Men in dark suits stepped out first. Then a woman in sunglasses and a cream-colored power suit emerged from the second car, graceful and devastatingly composed. Even before she removed the glasses, authority entered the street ahead of her. Kwame stared. Helena Dlamini, philanthropist, investor, infrastructure queen. One of the richest women on the continent. A woman whose signature could rescue a government project or destroy a company's future. Newspapers called her the Lioness of Southern Africa. Markets called her inevitable. Zola closed her eyes for 1 second. "Mother," she said. Kwame felt the world tilt. Because the quiet nanny they mocked, the woman slapped in a foyer, the caregiver dismissed through the side gate, was not just educated. She was Zola Dlamini, only daughter of Helena Dlamini. And even that was not the full truth. Helena entered the room with the calm of someone already informed. She embraced Zola first, not dramatically, but protectively. Then she turned to Kwame. "I assume," Helena said, "you belong to the family that mistook my daughter's silence for weakness." Kwame struggled for words. I didn't know." Helena's expression did not soften. "That was the point." Zola finally spoke. Months earlier, under her late father's surname and without public recognition, she had begun a private field project across elite homes, childcare agencies, and family-owned compounds. She wanted evidence, real evidence, of how domestic workers, nannies, cooks, gardeners, and housekeepers were treated behind tall walls and pretty reputations. No press team, no public announcement, no security bubble. Just observation. She had chosen the Mensah estate because the family foundation publicly championed women and children while quietly underpaying, humiliating, and cycling through staff. She had entered as a nanny because it was the role that saw everything and was respected least. Kwame sat down slowly. That explained the books, the intelligence, the restraint. The way she spoke like someone holding back entire truths with her bare hands. But Helena had not come only as a mother. She had come as leverage. Because the Mensah Group was weeks away from a major port expansion deal in which Helena's investment consortium held quiet but decisive influence. The same family that had mocked Zola for being just staff was preparing to beg Helena Dlamini for financial partnership. And now Helena had all the evidence she needed. The reckoning arrived the next night. The Mensah family had organized a private dinner with investors, legal advisors, and Vanessa's parents to formalize the future merger through marriage and business ties. Crystal glasses gleamed under chandelier light. Richard delivered rehearsed confidence. Madame Beatrice wore emerald silk and the face of a woman certain life still answered to her. Then the front doors opened. Conversation died instantly. Helena Dlamini stepped inside first. Beside her walked Zola. Not in a nanny's modest uniform, not with Ethan's toy bag over her shoulder, but in a deep, wine-colored gown, elegant and controlled, carrying herself with the quiet force of a woman who no longer needed anybody's permission to be seen. Madame Beatrice nearly dropped her glass. Vanessa went pale. Richard stood so suddenly his chair scraped against the floor. Kwame did not move at all. He only watched Zola, realizing that the woman he thought he was trying to understand had been far above the imagination of everyone in that house. Helena approached the table. "Good evening," she said. "I hope I'm not interrupting a performance." Nobody answered. She placed a leather file on the polished dining table. "My daughter spent time under your roof," Helena continued. "What she found there was educational. What she endured there was unforgivable. What she documented there is actionable." Richard forced a laugh that died quickly. "There must be some misunderstanding." Helena looked at him the way adults look at children who lie badly. "No, there is a pattern." She opened the file. Inside were testimonies from former staff, payroll discrepancies, medical neglect records, illegal deductions, unsigned labor arrangements, camera logs, audio notes, photographs, and written observations linking the family estate manager to a labor outsourcing company already under quiet investigation. Lydia's face lost color first, then Richard's, then Vanessa's father, who had not come expecting scandal and certainly not one with evidence. Madame Beatrice tried dignity. "Whatever issue there was with this girl, this woman," Helena corrected. The silence after that correction was brutal. Zola stepped forward at last. Her voice was calm, but every word landed like a gavel. "When I entered this house, I did not come for revenge. I came for truth. I wanted to know what people did when they believed no one important was watching. I wanted to see whether wealth had taught this family responsibility or only arrogance. I wanted to know how quickly human dignity disappears when money enters the room." She turned to Lydia. "You taught me that some women become cruel not because they are weak, but because power gives them permission." Then to Richard. "You taught me that public charity can be a costume." Then finally to Madame Beatrice. "And you taught me that the people who demand respect the loudest are often the people least willing to give it." Madame Beatrice's lips trembled with fury. "You deceived us." Zola held her stare. "No, I revealed you." Nobody moved. Even the air in the room felt afraid. Helena folded her hands. "My legal team can pursue this publicly by sunrise. The press would enjoy the contrast between your family foundation speeches and your household practices. Investors would enjoy it less, regulators least of all. Vanessa's mother stood up first. "We should leave." Vanessa followed without a word. The alliance that had looked so elegant 1 hour earlier was already collapsing under the weight of exposure. Richard cleared his throat. "What do you want?" Helena looked toward Zola. "My daughter decides." That was the moment the room truly changed. Because power had moved. Not loudly, not violently, but completely. Zola spoke without raising her voice. All current and former domestic staff connected to the Mensah estate would be compensated. Formal contracts would be issued. Medical protections and grievance channels would be established under outside monitoring. The estate manager and all associated outsourcing agreements would be investigated independently. The family foundation would redirect a significant public fund toward domestic worker safety, training, and legal protection across the region. And one more thing. Little Ethan's caregivers would never again be chosen based on obedience over competence. Richard looked sick. Lydia looked frightened. Madame Beatrice looked old for the first time. "And if we refuse?" she asked. Helena answered that one herself. "Then by tomorrow morning, you will learn how expensive disrespect can become." Long before anyone signed anything, Kwame already knew the fight was over. His family had spent years believing money made them untouchable. But there was something more dangerous than wealth. Witness. By the end of the night, the engagement plan was dead. The investors were whispering. The legal advisors had shifted from celebration to damage control. And for the first time in decades, Madame Beatrice could not command the room back into obedience. Weeks passed. The headlines never became as explosive as they could have, largely because Zola insisted the priority was structural change, not spectacle. She did not want mere embarrassment. She wanted reform. That difference shocked Kwame more than anything else. A lesser person would have burned the whole house down and called it justice. Zola wanted something harder. She wanted the future corrected. Richard stepped back from several public roles. Lydia disappeared from social circles for a while. Staff meetings were suddenly full of apologies from people who had never apologized before. Compensation funds were opened. External audits began. 2 managers were suspended. Contracts were rewritten. And through it all, Zola stayed involved. But from a distance. She refused to return to the mansion. She refused interviews. She refused to let newspapers turn her into a revenge fairy tale. "If people only remember the scandal," she told Helena one afternoon, "they will miss the workers who are still trapped in houses just like that one." So together, mother and daughter launched the Dignity Within Walls initiative, a program providing legal aid, emergency housing referrals, caregiver training, and labor rights support for domestic workers across multiple cities. The opening ceremony took place 3 months later. There were cameras, yes, but this time they were pointed in the right direction. Women stood in line for legal consultations. Men who had spent years as invisible drivers and gardeners filled out contract literacy forms. Young nannies attended childcare workshops that treated them like professionals instead of disposable help. Kwame arrived late, not because he did not care, because he was unsure what right he still had to stand in Zola's light. He found her near the registration tents, speaking to a grandmother who had just secured back pay after 7 years of silent exploitation. Zola listened the same way she always had, fully, carefully, without performance. When the woman left, Zola turned. For a second, neither of them smiled. Some truths change people too deeply for easy reunions. "I wasn't sure you would come," she said. Kwame nodded. "I wasn't sure I should." That made her study him. He had changed too. There was less family polish in him now, less inherited certainty, more honesty. "I helped my brother sign the reforms," he said. "I pushed for outside oversight. I testified when it became necessary. It doesn't erase anything, but I needed you to know I chose the truth." Zola was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked, "And did your family forgive you for that?" A small smile touched his face, tired but real. "No," which is how I know it mattered. For the first time, she almost laughed. He stepped closer. "I need to say this clearly," he said. "I admired you before I knew your name. I respected you before I knew your background. And when I discovered who you were, the only thing that changed was my understanding of how blind all of us had been." Zola's eyes softened, but only slightly. "And what do you see now?" Kwame answered without hesitation. "A woman who could have humiliated us completely and chose responsibility instead. A woman who entered cruelty without becoming cruel. A woman who did not need power to prove she had it." The wind lifted a corner of the banner above them. Somewhere nearby, children began laughing after a balloon slipped from a volunteer's hand and floated across the courtyard. Zola looked toward them, then back at him. "If there is ever any place for you in my life," she said, "it will not be because you defended me once in a hallway." Kwame nodded. "I know. It will be because you continue to stand correctly when it costs you something." This time he did smile. "Then I suppose I should keep earning the right to this conversation." Now she smiled too. Not widely, not carelessly, but enough to make hope feel possible. Across the street, inside a parked black car, Madame Beatrice watched the event through tinted glass. She saw the women entering the center. She saw reporters praising the initiative. She saw her grandson Ethan run into Zola's arms with the joy only children can afford to show honestly. And she saw Kwame standing beside the woman she once slapped in her own foyer. In that moment, the old matriarch understood something pride had hidden from her for too long. The future had already left her behind. It did not belong to the loud. It did not belong to the cruel. It did not even belong to the rich. It belonged to the people they had underestimated. And Zola Dlamini, the quiet nanny they tried to break, had become the woman no one in that family would ever dare look down on again.